Hey, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video. And in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Serrano versus Meinke fight. If you're new around here though and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like video if you do indeed like video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Serrano is 46-2-1 with 30 KOs and Meinke is 18-3 with 4 KOs. This fight is for the IBF, IBO, WBA and WBO World Featherweight titles. Serrano's last fight was a win via a unanimous decision versus Ramos, and Mike's last fight was a win via a unanimous decision versus Ledesma. They are both southpaws. Serrano is 35 and Meinke is 30. This is in Serrano's home country of Puerto Rico. And, to speak a bit more about what I've just said there, obviously this is the return of Amanda Serrano to 12 rounds, 3-minute rounds, and so she's fighting for that again. It's nice to see. It's impressive. It's history making to an extent that she's done it in the first place, and it's like I say, it's nice to see that it's getting happening again. It's a return of her fighting in Puerto Rico. It's been a while, I believe, that she's actually fought in Puerto Rico, so I'm sure she's going to be wanting to put on a show for her fans. With every fight that kind of goes on with Amanda Serrano, it seems like she's still been more active than ever with Jake Paul, but there is going to be a certain point where you think how many more she got left, and how many more years she's got left. Obviously she's 35, so she's not really particularly old, but she's been through quite a lot of really good fights, really entertaining fights, but a lot of wars and a lot of battles where she's had to go through, and managed to come out the end throughout a lot of them with a win. But still, there is going to be a certain point where you're going to have to think that it's going to catch up to her at some point, and I don't blame her to an extent for taking opponents like this, who on paper is probably a bit of an easier fight than what she could have possibly gone out and found. But it keeps her active. It's against an opponent who has still fought other fighters at the top level and has got a decent record, and so there's still elements of stuff there, and she most definitely can't really be overlooking Mike. I hope I'm pronouncing her name right. But there's still going to be a threat there, and I suppose the fact that they're both southpaws going to be entertaining to see how that plays out, and the fact that Mike has fought Taylor, obviously she lost and in quite bad fashion. Serrano's going to be wanting to emulate that same thing and beat her in better fashion, and I suppose if she does that, then there's another argument for there to be the rematch between her and Taylor, but I'm sure she's not really overly looking for that as a little added point. But also on this card is Gonzalez versus Santiago for the WBO World Light Flyweight title, a fight which I'm quite excited for, to be honest. It's not a huge fight, it's not really a clear champion, and it's not an amazingly good fight on paper, but I think stylistic wise it's going to be entertaining. I think Gonzalez is always an entertaining fight, and Santiago is he's coming in for this, and he's going to be a bit of an underdog. In my opinion, it is a bit of a step up for him, but we're going to see if he's ready for it. I think that Gonzalez is going to win via TKO in round 9. I think he's just going to be able to pepper Santiago for a lot of the fight, and his kind of will to fight on the inside and come at a high output is going to be a bit too much for Santiago, and I don't think he's going to be able to keep up. And Santiago, I don't think in general has got the best of balance, and I think if Gonzalez can hit him with some of the shots that he does land quite cleanly and close, then he could knock him down and be able to get him out of there from doing that possibly a couple of times, and then be winning the belt. I believe he is already champion, so remaining a champion. And also on this card is Paul versus Borland, which I think Paul will win via KO in round 4. Nice to see Jake Paul back fighting again, I suppose. It's another fight which is branded as him just rebuilding himself to become this next champion in actual boxing and be going down an actual boxing route. But it's against another opponent who nobody's ever really heard of, hasn't really done anything, has a better record than his last opponent, but if you actually go and watch any of the fights, he's not fought, like I mentioned, anybody of interest, and he's lost against any opponent who has been seen as half decent, and he really looks slow, he really looks like he can get tired easily. He also looks like he doesn't have the best of balance, and he looks sloppy. He has, alright body work, but other than that, there's not really too many key attributes in his favour. He doesn't really have much power either, and I think he's setting himself up for a relatively comfortable knockout victory. It would be a shame, and to be fair, it would be quite bad showing in my opinion if he doesn't go and knock out Borland here. And I think Paul, in my opinion, it would be nice to see him return back to, fighting. I respect him for doing what he's doing and trying to build an actual boxing name for himself, but I feel like, in my opinion, he sells the best. He gets the most amount of hype when he fights, these MMA guys or retired boxers, and I feel like he should go back to doing that. I don't believe that there's really much of a market in here for him to fight proper boxers, and I believe he will get to an actual level where he will just not be able to get past. And I just feel like these type of fights, obviously they build him up and give him experience, but I just don't really think they're necessary, really. And I suppose for a highlight reel knockout, it probably will bring that. And I'd like to hope, like I mentioned, that Paul does manage to get the stoppage early on in this fight. Going back to the main event though, so Serrano as a fighter, I mean, I've spoke about her a couple of times on the channel already, but of course, everybody's seen Amanda Serrano fight at this point. She's fought that many times. But of course, I'm gonna mention the positives about her. Of course, she gives her all in her fights and she lets her hands go. She's got great conditioning. She's shown that in multiple fights of hers. And with every time I see Serrano fighting, I always go back to that Taylor fight and just how good of a fight that was. It's just one of my favourite fights, and women's fights wise, probably is, in my opinion, the best of all time. And it was just such a war. Like I say, she really gave it her all, and was just letting her hands go the entire time. It was so entertaining. She's used to the pressure of being the home fighter. Obviously, she's now actually the home fighter, but used to being the pressure of being the favourite and being expected to win. She's used to that, and she seems to thrive upon that. She sits down on her shots very well. She seems to always pretty much sit down on her shots nowadays. Maybe a bit earlier on in her career she was moving a little bit better, but now she's sitting down all of her shots and becoming a bit more of a threat in that aspect, I suppose. She hasn't really been getting any stoppages as of recent, but I feel like she is becoming a bit more in your face a little bit more and trying to sit down on the shots a bit more. Just the stoppages haven't quite been coming, but I think she's going to be very determined to get a stoppage in this one and be more determined than ever to do so. She has overwhelming pressure. She beats you down. She's got physical pressure as well in the process, which a lot of women's fighters don't have, that actual physical pressure, that physical dominance that they can impose themselves with, and she does that very well. She doesn't really respect any of her opponents, and is always in front of her opponents. She's determined for a stoppage, like I mentioned. She fights at a very high pace, and she is a fast starter. And even with these 12 3-minute rounds, she's still going at the same pace in which she was before, and it hasn't really seemed to cause any of a problem for her, so credit to her. Negatives about her, I mean, obviously, like I say, she's been through a lot of wars. At some point, you'd like to think with age, at some point that's going to catch up. Possibly, we don't really know when. Nobody really knows when, but I feel like it might be quite a dramatic aspect, and possibly it could come at any moment. And you just like to think that she's prepared and she's preparing the best for every fight and knows that she's more than capable of being able to fight this fight. And I believe she is, really. And so I think it would take a lot for this fight to end up in a bad state for Serrano. She's willing to stand and trade a little bit too much at times. She definitely does get hit quite often, and that's become the style of what she's a bit more used to now. She hasn't really got particularly great head movements, and so, like I mentioned, she's there for counters. She's there to get hit when she is stood right in front of you. She stands relatively upright as well. She can sometimes struggle to cut off the ring a little bit at times and can just follow you around a bit. She will stalk you down, but sometimes it's just following you around a little bit. Accuracy at points isn't always amazing either. Like I say, she may be overlooking her opponents here. I mean, I don't really think she is, because she's fought a lot of her opponents that on paper aren't really at her level and then just become just beating them down anyway. So I don't know if she is really overlooking, but like I say, she can walk on 2 shots as well when she is trying to get stoppages, or in general when she's just walking you down. Speak about Meinke as a fighter, she moves well, she wants distance and does some of her better work at a mid-range. She doesn't really fight her opponent's fight, and she sticks to her game plan relatively well. She's a back foot type fighter who can, like I say, move around the ring quite well, pick her shots relatively nicely. She's used to being the underdog, and she, like I say, she fought Taylor, she fought Mahfoud, and she was the underdog for both of them. Obviously, she didn't win either of them, but she's more used to, being the underdog, and you'd like to think that she has improved from both of them fights. She's got solid timing, and Probably that's her best bit. I suppose she goes to the body quite well, quite nicely. She always aims to respond to any time she does get hit, so she does have that kind of determined mindset about her. But to speak about the negatives, she's lost at any kind of higher level opposition that she's fought. So on paper, you'd like to think that, like I say, Serrano will be able to get a convincing victory. She allows you on the front foot. She gives too much respect to you. She doesn't really change her game plan too much. She's not really willing to fight the opponent's fight, but she also won't really change her game plan in the process as well to stop things that are happening. It means that she can just get constantly hit with the same shot over and over again. She can struggle against pressure. She's got little offense at times. She can struggle to gain her own respect, and finding range can be a bit of a problem for her as well if she isn't just willing to stand and trade. She hasn't really got much head movement either. She's quite slow. She tires quite a lot, and her accuracy isn't great either. Serrano is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Serrano will win it via TKO in round 7. I think it's going to be a very convincing victory. Like I say, she's more determined than ever from having these 7 fights which haven't ended in stoppage to get a stoppage, and I think on paper this one, in my opinion, is the one which is going to be most likely to get a stoppage, and I think she will, just by beating her down continuously. In my opinion, that's how it's going to go. But to speak about who she could fight next, I mean, of course, the Taylor fight's always going to be there. Everybody realistically wants that fight to be made again before both of them retire, so hopefully it does, but I don't know if it will be next because Taylor, of course, seems like she's going to be fighting Cameron again. So, other possible opponents, Mahfoud versus Nicholson, seems like they're going to fight. On paper, that's probably the best bet of an actual opponent to fight. I mean, they're fighting for the, I believe, WBC title, but of course, that would probably be the best fight for Serrano, really, because she's beaten a lot of the top fighters, and unless she's willing to move weight division, there isn't really too many options left for her. There's some people like Budeza, and I suppose there's a couple of options, Raven Chapman, and there's a few options, but there's nothing like crazily big. And I think fight wise, she realistically should just be getting the big fights at this point, but. It'd be interesting to see where she goes from here. But like I say, I feel like getting her back to stoppage winning ways will just do her the world of good confidence wise. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did indeed like the video. Subscribe if you're new. And thanks for watching.